Welcome to Media Beat. My name is Neil Vidyarthi. I'm the editor of Social Times, and this is Mark Coatney, the media evangelist for Tumblr. And we're going to talk a little bit about journalism and how you got involved with Tumblr. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I'd been a journalist for like 15 years, first at Time and then Newsweek, always really on the web side. As part of my brief, especially at Newsweek, was to kind of just investigate emerging platforms. I was signed up for Newsweek on Twitter and Newsweek on Facebook. There's a Newsweek Posterous, Newsweek Dig, like everything that came out I would sign us up for and then figure out later, like, is this something we want to do or not? And so I started a Tumblr for Newsweek in 2008 because I'd had a personal one that I kind of liked for a while. And for the first year, I didn't really do anything with it because it was just a simple RSS feed, which is actually, for all you Tumblr people out there, that's actually really annoying, don't do that. But it was just an RSS feed of Newsweek's top stories because I didn't have any time and I didn't know what really the value was. And then at a certain point in, I think 2009, we had hired another editor. I had a little bit more time, and so I thought, well, let me play around with this a little bit and see what it does. And one thing I quickly learned to love about it was, it provided what I kind of call a peer-to-peer communication ability that was kind of hard to find elsewhere. Typically, if you take an issue of Newsweek's website, for instance, or any website, and print it out, it's pretty much the same thing as the print product. It's like, here's our story, read it and do something else. What I liked about Tumblr was it's really like, we're going to come in as Newsweek and participate with you using the same tools and the same venue and the same capabilities that you have as a person. And we're really going to try to, just interact with you, like as a one-to-one personal thing. And I think people really responded to that. Early on, one of my favorite quotes from early on was that Newsweek, first of all, to be fair, Newsweek on Tumblr was kind of like the talking dog. It was just amazing that it did it at all, kind of thing. Because the average Newsweek reader was like 57, and Tumblr's much younger than that, and so it was a whole new audience. But my favorite comment early on that somebody blogged about Newsweek is like, thanks to the Newsweek Tumblr, there's now not a non-zero chance that I would ever buy Newsweek. And I was like, that's all you want. He said that not a non-zero chance, Yeah. And so I thought it was a really good way to kind of reach a new audience, first of all. And second of all, I thought from our end, what it really provided was this really great feedback mechanism. Like you would blog something and then immediately you'd see, like, did people like it? Did people reblog it? And kind of this real-time kind of, referendum on how you were doing, because we quickly could say, okay, well, this is the kind of thing that works. This is the kind of thing that doesn't. And I think that's really valuable for any publisher because you get a better sense of what their audience is after.
Right. Well, one thing, a theme that you also talked about earlier was the idea of these social interactions between people one-to-one. And I think that's something that's always amazing, and I'm sure we can get into you as a media evangelist, talking to big brands and saying you don't want to necessarily be on that pedestal, you want to be right in there, on the ground level, on Twitter, on Tumblr, on Facebook, talking to people one-to-one.
To be honest, it's a real sea change from the way media orgs and big organizations have traditionally thought of themselves, and not because they're bad people or something like that, but because traditionally there wasn't any other way to do it. You really could just have your magazine or your TV broadcast and you send it out and then people would write you letters, and a month later you'd read them. And but one reason why people kind of have problems with the media or complain about the media or whatever, I really think is because they feel as though there's not any sort of communication or accountability there. And what this does is really let you say, okay, well, we're gonna, if you have an issue, we're gonna talk about it. And this is a space where we can talk about it kind of honestly. And fortunately for me in playing with this thing is one way that really came out was when Newsweek went up for sale. It would have been kind of weird to talk about it in a formal PR-y way on the website, but on the Newsweek Tumblr you could say, well, here's what's going on. People have said these things about us, here's why we don't think this is necessarily true or why it is true, and why we are in trouble. But at least you could talk about it in an honest way and kind of have a dialogue in a way that I think was harder to do in other places.
Oh, excellent. So now why did you make the jump from Newsweek to Tumblr?
Well, to be honest with you, I'd known those guys for a few years, and very nicely the day that Newsweek was put up for sale, I got an email from John Maloney, the president, who was like, well, we've been thinking about approaching you for a while, and now we think you might be receptive to our our offer. I was like, I might be. But it fundamentally, even if Newsweek was doing great or if it was some other thing, I just, there aren't that many times in your life that you get to do something that's kind of very different from what you have done, but also kind of in line with what you're doing.
Awesome.
So I thought it was would be a really good experience for me personally.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, so then, how do you think the next couple of years are going to shake out in terms of tools interactive tools like that, changing the way journalism is done? And how can people that are in existing media and existing journalists get involved in this new frontier?
One thing that's really cool is, it's kind of, to use an old metaphor, kind of punk rock. You really can, the tools are there, and if you have the, kind of courage to pick them up and grab them, you can be heard and you can do these amazing things. In a way that was sometimes harder to do before because there were kind of these gatekeeper, there were only a few ways to get published. There were certain things you had to do to kind of make your name and get known. But one valuable thing I think from these new tools is that people are able to kind of do more proactively.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, in the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about how social media has changed and created new types of jobs.
Cool.